This is Land of Havilah, 2 Kings 11. Jehu and his men killed the kings and royal families of Israel and Judah. Jehu took the throne of Israel, but there's a power vacuum in Judah. However, Athaliah is still alive. She was the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, who married Jehoram of the royal family of Judah, and became queen of Judah, then queen mother when her son Ahaziah took the throne. She's been influencing the kingdom for evil, 2 Chronicles 21:6 and 2 Chronicles 22:3. Athaliah's sons, quote, had broken up God's house, and they also gave all the dedicated things of Yahweh's house to the Baals, 2 Chronicles 24:7, meaning they vandalized Solomon's temple, desecrated it, took all the valuables out of it, and put them in the newly constructed temple of Baal in Jerusalem, 2 Kings 11:18. All this time Judah has been wasting away. Edom revolted, 2 Kings 8:22. Libnah revolted, 2 Kings 8:22. Arabians and Philistines invaded, looted, killed all the king's wives except Athaliah, killed all the king's sons except Ahaziah, 2 Chronicles 21:17. This was all a result of Judah abandoning Yahweh in favor of Baal. But Yahweh didn't destroy Judah for David's sake, 2 Kings 8:19. Now with King Ahaziah dead, Athaliah is left in Jerusalem to fend for herself. She can't go back to Israel. All her family there is dead. What shall she do? Verse 1. Now when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal offspring. Comment: virtually all the males of the royal family of Judah are already dead, killed during the Arabian invasion and by Jehu, 2 Chronicles 22:1 and 2 Chronicles 22, verses 8 and 9. There were some remaining, but Athaliah killed them, quote, all the royal offspring. So is there no one left in the line of David to take the throne? Verse 2. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's sons who were slain, even him and his nurse, and put them in the bedroom, and they hid him from Athaliah so that he was not slain. Comment: Athaliah killed, quote, the king's sons. The king was her son Ahaziah, so these were her own grandsons that she killed. She did so in order to take the throne for herself, 2 Kings 11:3. But one of the grandsons got away. By God's divine appointment, there was another royal woman named Jehosheba. She was the daughter of the previous king Jehoram, but we don't know her mother. Possibly it was Athaliah, but maybe it was another of Jehoram's wives. When she saw that Athaliah was killing her grandsons, she stepped in at great personal risk and hid one of them, a 1-year-old named Joash, along with his nurse. He was the tiny flicker of flame remaining of the house of David. Speaking of Joash the baby, verse 3, he was with her hidden in Yahweh's house 6 years while Athaliah reigned over the land. Comment: Jehosheba was the baby's great aunt. She or the nurse, it's unclear which. One of the two took care of the baby Joash in the temple of Yahweh while Athaliah ruled the land. The baby's mother isn't in the picture, so Athaliah probably killed her as well. One of those two women raised him in the broken-up house of Yahweh. Apparently they never set foot outside or they would have been recognized, and as for Athaliah, the temple of Yahweh was a place she never went. The priesthood must have been involved in the conspiracy. Sure enough, verse 4. In the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and fetched the captains over hundreds of the Kerites and of the guard, and brought them to him into Yahweh's house. And he made a covenant with them, and made a covenant with them in Yahweh's house, and showed them the king's son. Comment: that was the first mention of Jehoiada. He was the high priest at the time. He recognized the importance of preserving the line of David. So for 7 years it looked to the public like the line of David was destroyed, and the word of Yahweh appeared to be failed. But when Joash was 7 years old, Jehoiada presented him secretly to some of the elite troops of the kingdom, just to certain captains. And also he presented him to the guard, which is runners in Hebrew. These were the troops who personally guarded the royalty, even ran alongside their chariots, thus they simply called them runners. This is a picture and foreshadowing of the line of David today. It looks like the throne of Judah and Israel have been empty ever since the last king of Judah, ever since about 586 BC. But then there was a gap of not 6 years, but about 600 years, And Yahweh presented a baby to the world in the form of the Lord Jesus Christ, offspring of David, who rules continuously on the throne of Israel. He was hidden in the house of Yahweh all that time. In verse 4, Jehoiada brought chosen ones of the military, quote, into Yahweh's house and made a covenant with them, end quote, just as God has brought chosen ones of us into his house and made a covenant with us. And what's the purpose of the troops? It's going to be to support the coronation of the king and participate in introducing him to the public and destroying the unrightful ruler of the land, just as our role as Christians is to enter a covenant with Yahweh, be brought into his house, support the coronation of the Son, wage spiritual warfare on his behalf if necessary, participate in introducing the public to the rightful king of the world, and participate in the destruction of the unrightful ruler of the world, who is Satan. Then, as the people of Israel will do, we're going to establish a righteous kingdom. Verse 5. He commanded them, saying, "This is what you must do. A third of you who come in on the Sabbath shall be keepers of the watch of the king's house. A third of you shall be at the gate Sur, and a third of you at the gate behind the guard. So you shall keep the watch of the house and be a barrier. The 2 companies of you, even all who go out on the Sabbath, shall keep the watch of Yahweh's house around the king. You shall surround the king, every man with his weapons in his hand, and he who comes within the ranks, let him be slain. Be with the king when he goes out and when he comes in." Comment: those were Jehoiada's instructions to the captains and the guard. The translation is difficult in parts of verses 5 through 7, but clearly Jehoiada is arranging for Joash's presentation to the public. He's calling in all the officers and troops that would ordinarily be off duty. They're going to secure the king's house, which Athaliah now occupies, and the courtyard in front of the temple in the area of the altar and great basin. Then he's going to bring Joash out of the temple and present him to the public. This might be the first time that Joash has gone outside since he was a year old. Jehoiada says, "Whoever tries to break through your ranks and get to the king, kill him." Verse 9. The captains over hundreds did according to all that Jehoiada the priest commanded, and they each took his men, those who were to come in on the Sabbath and those who were to go out on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. Comment: the ones ordinarily scheduled to go out on the Sabbath stayed over to be there with the ones ordinarily scheduled to come in. This kept it looking as natural as possible. Verse 10. The priest delivered to the captains over hundreds the spears and shields that had been King David's, which were in Yahweh's house. Comment: Jehoiada armed the men with King David's spears and shields, which were in Yahweh's house. Possibly these were functional spears and shields, or they were gold ceremonial spears and shields that David took from Syrian king Hadad-ezer, 2 Samuel 8:7. But clearly at least some of the troops had to be wielding functional weapons, and we as Christians have been armed by our high priest Jesus Christ with shields and spears and other spiritual weapons of warfare. Verse 11. The guard stood, every man with his weapons in his hand, from the right side of the house to the left side of the house, along by the altar and the house, around the king. Then he brought out the king's son and put the crown on him, and gave him the covenant, and they made him king, and anointed him, and they clapped their hands and said, "Long live the king." Comment: there's a second account of this in 2 Chronicles chapter 23. Jehoiada assembled a crowd of leading men from all over Judah to attend the coronation. With the military in place and the crowd assembled in the courtyard, they brought Joash out of the temple, stood him beside a pillar, which coming up in verse 14 was the traditional place for the coronation ceremony, put the crown on his head, gave him the covenant, it's uncertain what that was, anointed him, and hailed him king. Long live the king. Verse 13. When Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of the people, she came to the people into Yahweh's house. And she looked, and behold, the king stood by the pillar, as the tradition was, with the captains and the trumpets by the king, and all the people of the land rejoiced and blew trumpets. Then Athaliah tore her clothes and cried, "Treason, treason!" Comment: Athaliah stormed in to see what all the commotion was about, and suddenly she saw trouble. There was nothing she could do but protest. Verse 15. Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains of hundreds who were set over the army, and said to them, "Bring her out between the ranks. Kill anyone who follows her with the sword." For the priest said, "Don't let her be slain in Yahweh's house." Comment: Jehoiada said, "Bring her out between the ranks," In other words, surround her with the military and take her out of the courtyard. We're going to kill her, but not here. Verse 16. So they made way for her, and she went by the way of the horses' entry to the king's house, and she was slain there. Comment, they took her to the palace by way of the horses' entry and killed her. Now that she's gone, verse 17. Jehoiada made a covenant between Yahweh and the king and the people, that they should be Yahweh's people, also between the king and the people. Comment, the boy's grandfather Jehoram reigned 8 years in Judah, and his father Ahaziah 1 year. Then Athaliah sat as queen for about 6 years, so it's only been about 15 years since the boy's great-grandfather, good King Jehoshaphat, died. That's about when Judah started going downhill. This means the people in the courtyard have been living through hell for about 15 years, but after the coronation they renewed their covenant with Yahweh. Then what? Verse 18. All the people of the land went to the house of Baal and broke it down. His altars and his images broke they in pieces thoroughly, and killed Matan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. Comment, now as for Jehoiada, still in verse 18, the priest appointed officers over Yahweh's house. Comment, Yahweh's house is in ruins, having been, quote, broken up, 2 Chronicles 24:7, meaning physically damaged to the point that it needed restoration, 2 Chronicles 24:4, and also meaning that services were disrupted, 2 Chronicles 23:18. But Jehoiada is appointing officers to begin the monumental task of rectifying the situation. Back to what they did on the day of coronation, verse 19. He took the captains over hundreds and the Karites and the guard and all the people of the land, and they brought down the king from Yahweh's house and came by the way of the gate of the guard to the king's house. He sat on the throne of the kings. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet. They had slain Athaliah with the sword at the king's house. Comment, quote, when it goes well with the righteous, the city rejoices. When the wicked perish, there is shouting. Proverbs 11:10, verse 21. Jehoash was 7 years old when he began to reign. Comment, Joash is also Jehoash. A child is on the throne, but Jehoiada the priest will be the power behind the throne for now. No doubt he's already like a father to the boy. It's a new day in Judah. Through it all, Yahweh is keeping his word to David, as he always will through Jesus Christ. 2 Kings 12 is next at landofhavilah.net, 2 Kings 12.